Hi everybody, welcome to the first video in a short series I'm going to do on setting up the Robin 400 Cadet using my Stream Deck and my X-Touch Mini. Just to keep the length of the videos down a bit, I'm going to break it up into 3 or 4 different sections to try and talk you through this. So the first one is just a brief overview of the aircraft if you haven't seen it. Strange choice, so it's not an airplane I usually fly, but I bought some training material from a company called FS Academy, and I bought a VFR training session and an IFR training session. And one of the strange things about it, I only just started using it, so I'm not sure if it's a criticism yet. It's got some ground school stuff for you to read, and then it puts you into an exercise to work on, but it doesn't tell you anywhere in the text what aircraft you're actually going to be flying. So it's quite a surprise when you start the one of the exercises and you discover which aircraft you're in. Now luckily it starts off with Cessna's 172, 152s or something like that, aircraft that I've flown fairly often, are fairly easy to get to grips with, but you are literally plonked in at say 2,000 feet, engine running, and not really sure where you are. It doesn't tell exactly where you're going to be placed and what direction you're going to be going, and it doesn't tell you what you're going to be flying. It's not until you get into the aircraft you suddenly see what you're confronted with. Those of you who've seen the old TV program Quantum Leap, it's a bit like that. You suddenly leap in as a pilot into an unknown aircraft. So I hadn't flown the Robin before, so it's quite a challenge to get to grips with that and land it with very little time to get used to it. So I thought, if I program up the aircraft and get to grips with it and fly it a bit before I go back and try the exercise again. So that's why I've chosen the Robin. And it's also slightly nostalgic for me that I was learning to fly gliders at one point in my life, and one of the in fact the only tow aircraft we had left at the club was a Robin, and it's fairly similar to this in its look and its layout, but it did have better view here. This was all stripped out, and this was windows so they could see behind quite clearly, and there's you couldn't fly in it. It literally was just a seat for a pilot, because they had to take a lot out to reduce the weight, but they also had to put an extra bracing in here to give it some more internal strength. I'm not quite sure what model it was, but it was fairly effective as a tow aircraft. So I was going to give you a quick guided tour of what you're confronted with and what we're going to try and simulate, and then we'll do a video on the Stream Deck video on the X-Touch Mini and show you how I've programmed that up, and then perhaps a little test flight with it so I'll get used to it. So, quick external view. It's got these interesting shaped wings. Not quite sure why, but it's quite distinctive when you see them on the ground. The Robins all seem to have this little dihedral type approach to them. And as you can see, it's a very basic 2-man tiny little trainer. This engine, I don't know what the engine actually is, but it's not very powerful. You do feel you're in a very underpowered aircraft compared to a 172. The climb on it isn't very good. It does have some quite effective flaps actually, almost act as speed brakes. If I can pull those down, let's have a look. When they're fully down, they really are quite effective, so you do get a lot of drag out of those. But there's basically big slats, nothing very fancy in the aerodynamics on them, and it's got an external trim tab there. So in the externals it's really relatively small and simple, and again quite effective, quite large ailerons, so you do get a fair bit of roll on them. So control surfaces are quite effective. And if we look inside, it's I hate to use the word primitive, it's a simple layout to get to grips with, but again, confronted with this, just landing in this aircraft and wondering what on earth am I flying on the training program, was quite interesting, particularly as it's all in French. Everything's labelled in French, so it took a little while to decode. And the one big thing to watch out for is the airspeed indicator, because it's in the major scale. It actually the outside one is in kilometres per hour. The inside one is in knots, and a lot of the pilot operating handbook is obviously going to be in kilometres per hour, but some of the things are given to you in knots, so you've got to watch out for that. Also, I find that when I'm in the normal seating flying position, it's actually a little bit small, a little bit dark here to see it, so you do sort of end up zooming in and having a look at what's going on there. So you've got the normal kind of six-pack approach here, so they're all multilingual. You don't really need to know what they are, and we've got one single sort of old-fashioned VOR to look with. There's no ADF on this one, which is strange. This is blanked off. I wonder if ADF would normally be there, but it's a strange thing not to have on an aircraft of this age, not to have an ADF somewhere around. Okay, it's quite a good training aircraft. You've got twin throttles. If I move my throttle back, you can see it's got a throttle that's available both to the pilot and co-pilot, or which way, instructor, student, whichever way you want to look at it. And it's really designed for it to be in your left hand, which is quite unusual, but it means you can reach and use the right hand one. But it's quite unusual to have a left hand throttle, as far as I'm concerned. I've not been in a plane that's ever had one of those before. Okay, we've got a battery indicator here, so we can see the state of play of the battery and the alternator, and we have got here the key for the magnetos, which is left, right and both. It will start from that in the way I've programmed it up, but the start is actually hidden here, underneath here. So that's the fuel cut-off. So the idea is if the fuel's cut off, you can't start your engine, so you need to bring the fuel round so that it's on, and then you can start there. Okay, so while we're down here, let's have a look at this. This is a genuine joystick, and foot pedals are under here, and little toe brakes and etc. under there. Let's work from here. This is the flaps lever. The flaps have full on, halfway and off. So there's no flaps indicator anywhere. You have to look down at the handle there to see what you've got. And in fact, when you're really flying it, you would normally press that button in and pull that up, so you can put it to the various positions. But it works quite well just with the allocation I've got on my joystick. Trim wheel and trim indicator. So it's funny, it's so smooth, probably a bit slippery in your hands actually, and you can just about see it animating, but you can certainly see the indicator moving here. So that's the trim indicator there. Okay, I'm not sure if it actually says anything. Yeah, it says trim there. Not quite sure what this is, but it's clearly not active anyway, so I don't need to translate that and do that. What have we got here? What have we got? Mixture. Up here we have got a carburetor heat there, and this here is the parking brake. So pushed in, it's off, pulled out, the brakes are on. This here is the fuel pump. Not labelled with anything, but you discover that as you click around and press on things. We've got a fuel indicator, nothing here. We've got a fuel pressure gauge, which is unusual to have, but that we have got one. RPMs for the engine, no exhaust temperature gauge, so if you are going to be using the mixture, it's really using your ears to hear as the revs increase and decrease. that we can't actually see one there. Of course, it is being measured by Microsoft's system, so we can extract that and have it up on our Stream Deck like we've had before. So if you really want it, you can have it, but it's a tiny bit unrealistic. Oil temperature. I believe it's temperature. There's your oil temperature, oil pressure here. So they're quite keen on monitoring the oil. Up here we've got an annunciator. Let's flick the battery on. So it will go and test to make sure all the lights are working. So it just flicks its spring release and it flies back up again. And it has also got a night setting. If this is too bright at night time, you can actually turn the brightness down a bit there. So there's that little bit there. So there's your annunciator there. And if we just shift across over here, let's have a look. What have we got here? Well, we've got our lights, and again, a bit of translation. We've got navigation, anti-collision, that's pretty easy to translate. Taxi and landing lights. So those are the 4 light switches that we've got. And we've got pitot heat there. So that's available to us. And it's got 1 radio and 1 nav device. That's it. There's no radio 2, no nav, and of course it's got the transponder there. And this is your avionics on/off switch, and it's actually seems to park mostly with the avionics on, but there we are. That's where it is. Okay, here we've got some lights for night flying. And it turns out that this is the glare shield. This lights up the bottom portion here. This one lights up from the top down, and this one here determines the brightness of the text here behind the radio. Not that it's that distracting, but you can see that there it is. It's turning down. You can see these are dimming. So it is available to you, and I have worked out how to program those pretty well, so we're okay with those. And then over here we've got some carburetor heat, so we can watch that and use that with our carburetor heat there. And flight time, the hobs, again blanked off here, so we haven't got an ADF or exhaust gas temperature. They're the bits we're missing really, but that's it. So that's what it looks like. So well, let's get it alive. Let's see what's going on. So let's get some magnetos in so we can have it on both. Batteries on. Let's go mixture rich and throttle full, and we'll put up some fuel pressure, and then we need to hold the starter in till it starts. It takes a little while for it to kick. It's a bit rough and gruff. But there we have an engine running. The battery, you can see, is quite depleted, so let's turn the alternator on. You can see that that's responded there, so that will be charging quite happily. And that's really about it. Let's have a look at the what's going on over here with the carburetor heat. So let's get the right button pressed. And I'm just going to move this carburetor heat here and see what happens. So that'll be warming that up quite nicely. So we can see what's going on with the carburetor heat, and let's change the mixture. So let's pull back on the mixture. So that works. Okay, so that's what we're going to try to emulate there. It's no autopilot, very little on the comm side of things. So it's fairly minimal amount of stuff that we have to do here to get this to work. So we'll do that in the next video. We'll start with the Stream Deck and see what buttons we need to press there. Again, a lot of it will be recycled from previous planes, because it's pretty much the same switches and things throughout, and it's really just about getting the layout to look nice. and one or two little wrinkles that we can get over, particularly with the enunciator. I've struggled a bit to make that work, but I think I've got the basics of it working now. So we'll see that in the next video then. Okay, so I'll make a link come up the top right hand corner of the video, so if you finish with this one, it should be able to make it move on quite easily to the Stream Deck video which I'll make next.